Hey everyone, so today we're going to talk a little bit about freedom. About a week and a half ago, I was having a conversation with a very nice young gentleman who is my age, who's also going to college. He is a public policy major, and so he was telling me about some of the things that he learned in his class. We disagreed on a couple things, but overall the conversation was very good, very pleasant, and we had some good discussions. One of the things that he said, though, that kind of got the gears turning in my mind a little bit, and I was kind of surprised that this was being taught in his public policy class here at college. Uh, it was an interesting take, and I'm not sure he didn't explain it super clearly, and so this is just what I understood from what he told me. So first off, he was about to tell me about what they were talking about in their class about freedom and the definition of freedom. So he looks at me and he goes, "Well, before I tell you what we talked about, what's your definition of freedom?" And I sat there a moment and I was like, "Hang on a second, give me a moment to think about it." So I have a genuine answer, and I sat there maybe for a minute, maybe two, and then I looked at him and I was like, "Freedom is access to opportunity with the acceptance of responsibility." So I'll say that again. Freedom is access to opportunity with the acceptance of responsibility. Now he took that and he kind of molded over and was like, "Okay, I understand. Okay," and and then he looks at me and he goes, "So in our class, we were talking about how freedom is obeying." And I kind of paused and I was like, "What?" And he goes, "We learned in our class that freedom is obeying." And I just kind of sat there like, "Okay, expound, what do you mean by this?" And so he started explaining, and it was a little rough trying to follow. He tried to use some examples from his class, but they didn't really make much sense. Like he talked about the Lion King and how Simba, when he's young, he thinks he can do anything, and he's supposed to stay away from the Shadowlands. And then Mufasa dies, and he runs away and he loses himself, and then he has a vision that his dad's like, "Remember who you are," and then he comes back and he's who he is again, and he has freedom because he knows to obey the rules now, or something like that. It didn't really make much sense. I think the point that he was trying to get to is that it's kind of the relationship that similar to what I had with my parents, for example, where when you have your child who is doing good things, and is obeying the rules, you're going to give them more responsibility and more freedom because you can trust them in order to do the right things, and they're going to follow the rules, and so you give them increased access to rules. Okay, so that I think was what he was trying to get to. Also, in maybe a gospel context, when we are obeying God's commandments, we are given greater access to his power, and we're not limited by the consequences of our own choices. The problem with that is that when you put the government, which is made by imperfect men and women, in the role of a parent or in the role of a deity, that puts them in the wrong role. So government is meant to be a servant to the people. The Constitution was set up by the founders in such a way that it was meant to limit the darker, more evil human side of people. It was meant to enable the light, good part of people, because everybody has a little bit of both in them, and it's up to us and our agency to make the decisions between right and wrong. So when he looks at me and he goes, "Freedom is obeying," I didn't say this. My first thought was, that sounds like something that you would hear from a totalitarian government. That is something that you would hear from a very power-hungry government that is trying to control the people. Hey, if you obey us, that is how you get freedom. this, freedom if you obey us. That doesn't make sense. It does make sense, but not in the context of a free and happy country. There's a person I follow on YouTube, her name is Patriot Nurse. She said, and I fully agree, that the founders of the Constitution knew that the Constitution would only last so long. The founders knew that eventually the Constitution would be chipped away at until it was hanging by a thread, as some of the elders of our church have said. We need to understand that when we talk about freedom is kind of like I said, and feel free to expound on my definition, but freedom is access to opportunity. So opportunity available to you. It's not being withheld from you because of discrimination, because of money. Freedom means that everybody has access to make themselves and their situation better. With that comes the acceptance of responsibility. That freedom does not mean I can do whatever I want and get away scot-free. Our actions have consequences, and there are things that are set in place in order so that we don't hurt those around us or infringe on the rights of others. And so the Constitution and the government were made to help us to have the most access to freedom that we can, while putting limits and consequences in place so we don't hurt each other. So that's all I had for you guys today. The last thing I want to leave you guys with is my testimony that I know that Christ is at the head of the church, and that he is watching over the world today, and that through him and in him all things are possible. So God is still a God of miracles. If not, God would cease to be God. We need to be praying for our country and our family and our friends and those around us. We need to be staying close to the Spirit and making sure that we are paying attention to whatever the Lord is trying to tell us. Also, I want to remind everybody that there is the horrific crime of sex trafficking, and that there are victims being caught in this every single day. It is our modern day slavery, and it is absolutely evil. So I would encourage anybody to spread awareness of that and to donate towards funds that will aid in helping rescue these people. There's no justification for it. Anyways, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and that you have not only the Spirit of the Lord, but the Spirit of freedom with you as you go about your day.